Imagine, just for a moment, a man with a name shared by one of the most infamous comic book anti-heroes, Wade Wilson. But in his case, this name is far from fiction. It's the embodiment of a chilling, real-life nightmare. A man whose actions left the world in shock and disbelief. Wade Wilson, infamously dubbed the Deadpool Killer, was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of 2 women in Florida. But what led this man down such a dark path? And how did justice finally close in on him? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will keep you questioning everything about human nature, criminal behavior, and the darkness lurking beneath the surface. Wade Stephen Wilson's story begins in the small town of Tallahassee, Florida, where he was born on May 20th, 1994. Adopted by well-meaning, church-going parents, Wilson's early life was filled with promises of a better future. But as we know, appearances can be deceiving. His story started in the most ordinary way possible, yet his descent into darkness would shock even the most hardened crime enthusiasts. But what triggered this transformation? During his youth, Wilson was often described as troubled and was reportedly involved in minor criminal activities and substance abuse. And most disturbingly, he sustained multiple head injuries that would later be cited as contributing factors to his erratic behavior. Wilson's criminal history dates back to 2012. Burglary, grand theft, firearms offenses. These weren't petty crimes. They were a sign of something far more sinister. And yet, they barely made a dent in his freedom. But that's just the start. What happened in 2015? A sexual battery and kidnapping charge that shockingly ended in acquittal. Could he have been stopped then? Or was it just the calm before the storm? Fast forward to 2017, Wilson was convicted for firearm theft. With each crime, his record grew, but did society miss the red flags? Then, in early 2019, a terrifying accusation. His ex-girlfriend Kelly Matthews claimed Wilson kidnapped and sexually assaulted her. Could this be the turning point? Just months later, in July 2019, he was arrested again. But was this the final straw, or did something far darker unfold after that? It was supposed to be just another night out, but it turned into a nightmare. On the night of October 6, 2019, Wade Wilson, with his girlfriend Melissa Montanez, entered a club called Buddha Live in Fort Myers. Here, fate intervened when they met Jason Shepard, who invited them to his home. But the dark twist? Melissa didn't want to go. This was just the beginning of a horror none of them could see coming. Later that night, Wilson, introducing himself as JR, met Christine Melton and her friend Stephanie Johnson at the club. Christine, a 35-year-old woman, was described as precious by those who knew her. She had no idea that her life was about to end in the most brutal and heart-wrenching way possible. After an innocent conversation, she and Wilson ended up at Jason's house. But what happened when the night took a deadly turn? Wilson and Christine engaged in a consensual sexual encounter, but this would be Christine's last moment of peace. Hours later, in her duplex home, she was dead, strangled in her sleep, and brutally beaten with a curtain rod. But that wasn't enough for Wilson. No, he took her life and then stole her Nissan Versa. The chilling next step? He then made a call to his girlfriend Melissa, but this time it wasn't just to talk, it was to demand that she meet him. Now, brace yourselves, because what happened next was horrifying beyond belief. By the time Wilson made his way to Melissa's workplace, Mila Spa, his actions had spiraled into violence once more. He tried to force her into his car, but when she refused, his anger flared. He pulled her hair, choked her, punched her, even dragged her by her dress. Eyewitnesses called 911, but as sirens wailed in the distance, Wilson fled the scene, only to commit another brutal crime. He encountered Diane Ruiz, a 43-year-old bartender and mother of 2. She was simply trying to give him directions, yet Wilson lured her into his car, where he attacked her mercilessly. But that wasn't the end. He ran her over repeatedly, leaving her mutilated body in the street. How could someone commit such violence? Was there any remorse in Wilson's heart, or was he completely void of humanity? Wilson's trail of destruction didn't end there. In a bizarre and almost surreal twist, he was spotted walking into Joshua Lukic's business, Mateo Graphics. Joshua described Wilson as frantic, wearing no shoes, no shirt, and missing a couple of teeth. Wilson tried to get any ticket he could to leave town, but Joshua's gut instinct told him something was horribly wrong, and he called 911. But Wilson was still on the run. By the time the authorities had arrived, he had already left the scene. But as fate would have it, police finally caught up with him at Joe's Crab Shack parking lot, where Wilson, ever the cold-blooded figure, appeared nervous and defensive. Yet, the police couldn't immediately arrest him for his more severe crimes, only for a minor offense related to his battery of Melissa. Later that day, authorities located Melton's car and attempted to contact her, but received no response. When they went to her home to check on her, they discovered her body wrapped in a blanket. Deanne Ruiz's body was found in a field in Cape Coral on October the 10th, 2019, 4 days after she was reported missing. How did this killer slip through police fingers time and time again? It wasn't until Wilson made a chilling confession to his biological father, Stephen Testaseca. Wilson initially asked for help arranging an Uber to leave town. When asked where he was, Wilson openly admitted to his actions, boasting of the murders without a shred of remorse. His father's response? Testaseca provided his son's whereabouts to police, who arrested Wilson on October 8, 2019, in a house he had broken into while the owner was out of town. The trial that followed in 2020 was nothing short of brutal. The prosecution painted Wilson as a remorseless, cold-blooded killer. Wilson's actions were marked by extreme brutality and were described by Assistant State Attorney Andreas Gardner as killing for the sake of killing. But the defense? They tried to argue that Wilson was a victim of mental illness. Dr. Mark Rubino, an expert in psychology, testified that Wilson had severe brain injuries and mental health issues, yet the jury didn't buy it. August 27, 2024, the jury deliberated for a mere 2 hours before delivering a verdict. Guilty. Wilson was sentenced to death, with the judge describing both murders as heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and that the second murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated. The decision was met with applause from the gallery, reflecting the community's relief at the verdict. Yet despite his conviction, Wilson's story is far from over. His case remains under appeal. Here's where the story takes another strange turn. Despite the brutal nature of his crimes, Wilson gained a bizarre following. Almost 4,000 messages were sent to him in prison, many from women who seemed to develop romantic feelings for him. This phenomenon, known as hybristophilia, has puzzled experts. Why would anyone feel attraction to a man like Wade Wilson? Could it be the allure of notoriety, or is there something darker at play? As we wrap up this chilling tale, one haunting question remains. Could this tragedy have been prevented? With early interventions, could Wade Wilson have been stopped before he spiraled into a cold-blooded killer? Or was it inevitable? What do you think? Leave your thoughts and speculations in the comments below.